fact that it is her generosity and kindness that makes her say such good things and nice things about me. I'm just a small person trying to do the right thing. And it was a great pleasure to have her as a distinguished scholar. She mentioned the fact that at the Center for India Studies at Stony Brook, we have a distinguished speaker series, and she came in that series as a speaker and gave absolutely brilliant lectures on yoga and the Bhagavad Gita. And all our students there, in one meeting, I think there were about 100 plus students, and in another about 35 or something. It depends on time and all kinds of things, as you know. So it was a pleasure to have her not only as a scholar, but also as a human being. And we've had a wonderful interaction over the years. And I remember Professor Schechter, who used to be here and who was such a great support for our work. And I'm very grateful to all of you for coming here today on a Friday afternoon. And I see so many friends and distinguished people here like Jairaj, the former commissioner of the city of Bengaluru, and an old classmate of mine from Central College, going back more than 50 years. So it is again his affection that has brought him here. And similarly, Professor Venkat Subbaya, who has done a concordance, a 3-volume concordance to Kumaravyasa. As you know, it's one of the most difficult things to do, because what it does is to give the meaning of every word that is there in the text, as well as the context in which the word occurs, both the textual context and the general context. And I hope it will be, thank you, please get up and take a bow. It is a labor of love. He has done that without any grant or any support, and I hope it will be published soon. We are trying to get that done. And thank you all for coming. There is so much to say about this topic that I would like to get started right away. This is a picture of our campus, Stony Brook. So you, on behalf of Stony Brook and the Mattoo Center for India Studies. I'll just say a couple of words about this at the start and then come back to it at the end. The Indian literary canon. So about Indian literature, we normally talk about the greats. Vyasa, Valmiki, Kalidasa, and all the great dramatists like Bhasa and Jayadeva, and the great poets, Magha, and all of those Sanskrit poets, as well as the regional language classics like Tagore, and others like the Tamil Sangam literature, and perhaps Gyandev sometimes, and Premchand, to talk about modern literature. But seldom do we see any work of Kannada literature mentioned until recently, when Ramanujan translated the Vachanas. And even more recently, when Girish Karnad put out the translation, English translation of his play, Tughlaq. And Ramanujan also translated Anantamurti's Samskara. So that has become fairly well known in India and abroad. But other than that, you don't see much in terms of Kannada mentioned when we talk about Indian literature. I attended a conference on the Mahabharata 12 years ago in New Delhi. It was attended by scholars from around the world. There were about 200 scholars from Southeast Asia, from America, from Europe and Japan and so on and so forth. And I gave a talk on Kumaravyasa's Bharata. A friend of mine called Billy Malay, some of you know, gave a talk on Yakshagana, Mahabharata and Yakshagana. And then my friend Shiv Prakash gave a talk on Pampa's Mahabharata. And the talks went well, people liked it. But in the subsequent discussion, I was flabbergasted to learn that almost nobody had heard about Kumaravyasa. It was a new word, new author, new work for them. And here we are, thinking about Kumaravyasa and Pampa as the two great crown jewels of Kannada literature. So our very best literature is unknown to people outside of Karnataka, let alone in the rest of the world. But for those who are familiar with the work, like I have the privilege to be, thanks to great friends like Kiram Nagaraja and Shatavadhani Ganesh and many others, it's a shocking thing because we think that this is a magnificent work, one of the finest that you can conceive in the world. And therefore, we thought that as people who have had the privilege of learning English, we bilinguals have a responsibility to do something about this, namely to bring it to the attention of the literary world outside of Karnataka as well as outside India. And so I made a proposal to the Murty Classical Library of India, of which Professor Shangan Pollock is the general editor. They had just announced it. Rohan Murty had established an endowment with the Harvard University Press. And the idea was to publish the greatest works of Indian literature in modern English translation, as many as 500 of them, and to make sure that they would be in print in perpetuity. They should never go out of print. And they should be done at the highest scholarly standards. And they should be bilingual editions with all the scholarly apparatus. And so they should be something like the Lord's Classical Library of Greek and Latin classics that you see in every library in the world. Go to Seshadri Ayer's library here, and that will have it. And all the major libraries, university libraries will have it and so on. So hundreds of volumes occupying entire, not shelves, but bookcases. And Indian classics would be like that. So when I heard that, I thought this would be the most appropriate outlet for our translation. Because one of the problems with our translations is that there are lots of translations, but they are lying in garages or godowns without anybody knowing about them, without publicity, without proper distribution, and without reviews and without scholarly discussion. So that would be a wasted effort. So I thought what we really need is to do the translations and publish them in such a way that the entire world of academia, to start with, would take notice. And something like Harvard University Press would be the right thing to do, because it reaches the entire world. And so I made this proposal, and we also decided that it would be very difficult to do the entire thing for one person. And so we decided to do it as a consortium. And I contacted some of the greatest scholars who know English and Kannada. So Professor C.N. Ramachandran, a professor of English, who is also a very distinguished critic in Kannada. Professor H.S. Raghavendra Rao, an authority on Kumaravyasa and on Kannada literature in general. Professor Shiv Prakash, who is himself a very great poet and dramatist. Professor Narayan Hegde, who has translated a lot of modern Kannada literature, such as Anant Murty's Avasthe and Suryana Kudure and other works. And myself. So there would be 5 of us. Each of us would do 2 parvas and an abridged version of these. So about 2,500 Sherpadis in total. We can give an idea of the best of Kumaravyasa to the world. Hopefully, the whole volume, the whole work would be translated at some other time. So the objective was to demonstrate the poetic genius of Kumaravyasa and argue for his inclusion in the pantheon of Indian and world literary masters. And so I'm very happy to say that the work that we started in 2015, after 8 years, has borne fruit, and the first volume is out here. And you can all, thank you. And you can all buy it here, right outside this auditorium. The first volume has the 2 parvas, Adi Parva and Sabha Parva. So it comes to a total of about 720 pages or so. And it has an introduction, it has footnotes, it has endnotes, it has a glossary, it has a bibliography, it has a concordance corresponding to the verses in the Masti and Kuvempu version. So these are the people who we have been working with, and I'm very glad to say, so you see here from left to right is Raghavendra Rao, C.N. Ramachandran, Ara Mitra, one of our consultants, who has written a beautiful book on Kumaravyasa, and myself. And in the back row is Professor Krishnamurti Hannuru. He is an excellent scholar and also a writer in Kannada. And the next to him is Narsimurti, who works in the Kannada Ganaka Parishad, so computational center. And he has been doing the Kannada text for us. And I'm glad to say that one of them who was there at that meeting is actually here today, Professor Venkat Subbaya. And after him is Professor K.S. Madhusudana, another great Kannada scholar who has written a lot about old editions of Kannada, and he was a professor at Acharya Pathshala. And Narayan Hegde is here. So this is our Center for India Studies, and so we've had scholars come there and stay with us and talk to us, and so Hanur is there and Shiv Prakash is there. Shiv Prakash was not there at that original meeting, but and these are again we get together and talk about these things, and so this is a lively moment. Okay, so let me go fast. The title of the book is, for those who may not be familiar with it, Karnata Bharata Katha Manjari. It's also known as the Kannada Bharata or Gadugina Bharata because the author came from Gadag in North Kannada, Karnataka. The author is known as Gadagina Naranappa. He calls himself with the pen Vyasa approximately around 1400 AD. Not quite sure exactly when he lived. And the total the work is about 8,500 or 8,200 stanzas depending on interpolations and so on. It's in the form known as Vamini Shetpadi, which is a 6-line stanza, and which has a second syllable rhyme. So, but that's last rhyme, it rhymes on the second syllable of each line, same sound. And he sustains it for 8,500 stanzas. It's not easy. And he does it so fluently that you don't even notice that there is a rhyme there. So it has the power of blank verse, and it's like Dante's terza rima. Again, with an intricate pattern, rhyme scheme, but you don't even notice it. It is so fluent. So the 6-line pattern, as opposed to the 2-line anushtup, permits ample scope for every kind of idea: description, narration, racy dialogue, multiple sentences within a stanza, and so on and so forth. So the first question that everybody asks is, how is this different from Vyasa? It's a long story, so we have to give, we need another lecture just for that. But I'll just give a couple of items. Kumaravyasa is a master synthesizer, compressor, and abridger. He only talks about the first 10 parvas rather than the 18 parvas of the Vyasa Bharata. It ends with the war and the coronation of Yudhishthira and the fall of Duryodhana. He omits most of the digressions. There is a lot of digression, as you know. One of the longest parvas is Shanti Parva, and that's all advice to Yudhishthira on how to govern. He gets rid of all of that. He summarizes a lot of them. He expands some incidents like Uttara Kumara's boast. And he dismisses the whole of the Bhagavad Gita in a few stanzas. And he reimagines the whole thing. In this rendering, Krishna is at the center of the story. He is at the heart of the story. He is the Sutradhara. He brings about everything. And also, Kumaravyasa focuses on dramatic episodes. And he explores the psychology of the characters and the interplay of the human and the divine. So the human beings aspire to be divine by becoming larger than themselves, like Arjuna when he meets and fights with Shiva and obtains Pashupatastra. And Bhishma when he confronts Krishna, for example, and so on and so forth. This one is the most beloved work of Kannada literature. Pampa is revered, but Kumaravyasa is loved. It's popular among ordinary people, even rural people, illiterate people, as well as learned scholars and the literati. So, in the long tradition of Kannada literature, going back to the 9th century, Kumaravyasa is considered one of the 2 greatest writers, the other one being Pampa, or perhaps the greatest one in Kannada literature. There are many, many reasons for his popularity. We won't go into that now, because his work is rich in detail, it's concrete, it's dramatic presentation, not a boring recitation of a vast range of human behavior and emotions. So people can relate to them, even folk elements. And there is a performance tradition called the Gamaka tradition, in which there is a singing of the stanzas with a commentary by a learned scholar. And each Shatpadi is sung in a different raga appropriate for that particular emotion, whether it is Karuna or Shanta or Veera or Hasya or Bhivatsa or whatever. And it can go on for many days. Okay, now I'd like to go quickly to talk about how Kumaravyasa is a master storyteller and how he's a narrative genius. The first thing we notice is that he has extensive worldly experience. We know very little about him as an author. The tradition is that he was a village accountant, Shanbhoga. And in a small village called Kodivada near Gadag. We infer that because he himself doesn't say a thing about himself in the book, except certain modest statements. We infer that because his descendants have the same profession. And he gives a vast, apt description of a vast range of situations and feelings, from the ridiculous to the sublime. We'll talk about that in a minute. His narration is always racy, it keeps moving. It's never flagging, it's never static, always dynamic. There is a majestic flow, or ogha, as we say in Kannada. And he never uses, he may be a little repetitive sometimes. If he sees Krishna, he gets carried away and he can go on talking about it. But he is never inappropriate. The wrong thing he never says. Maybe he says too much. That's why we condensed it. That's why, in fact, his poetry is always enjoyed in episodes. The whole thing, nobody reads it together in one sitting. So it's always in episodes. Draupadi Vastrapaharana, Abhimanyu Marana, Duryodhana Kalaga, this, that, etc. And he chooses these episodes always centered on human emotions and behavior. And the way he depicts it, even the gods behave like humans. Krishna, for example, is always observing appropriate propriety. So he greets the people according to their rank and things like that, and so on and so forth. So, there are lots and lots of dramatic scenes there. The whole story, this is the book. See how big this is? And it is, the verses are printed in 2 columns. And there are some 630 pages or something like that. It's a very long book. But still, it's a very short book compared to the original Mahabharata, which is so unwieldy. 100,000 verses. So what he does is he chooses these dramatic scenes and talks about them. For example, Duryodhana and Arjuna both go to see Krishna to seek his help in the war. But again, a beautifully crafted, dramatic scene. And after a while, Krishna actually tries to tell them, don't fight. The war is not good. Everybody is killed. And so other people, in fact, there's a beautiful saying there, where they say that, these wars are like the fight of the sheep and goats. They encourage you to fight so that if they are fighting with each other and other people have fun, but you are the ones who will suffer. Tagore Ata. And Duryodhana couldn't care less. He says, Dharma Shravanake Ballilla. We didn't come here to listen to this ethical preachings. And Krishna offers, either you can have my army or me, but I will not fight. I will not take up arms. And he offers the choice first to Arjuna. Why? Because Arjuna was sitting there right in front of him. Krishna is lying down, Arjuna comes, and politely he sits at his feet. Duryodhana, on the other hand, is so full of hubris in himself, he would consider it below his dignity to sit at Krishna's feet, and so he sits at his head. So he doesn't see him first. So Arjuna chooses Krishna. He says, okay, even if you don't take up arms, I would rather have you on my side. And Duryodhana wants the army. And what's the reason that Arjuna gives? Arjuna says, Now Badavaru. He says, we have just been running around in the forest for 13 years. We don't have any money. We can't afford to feed an army. So it's enough if you come. Of course, this is a joke. It's a sense of humor. But the point is, he injects it very quietly. And Krishna himself pokes fun at himself. Now undadi bhattaru munnina javvana bala musulitu chakra bhandarisitu. He says that we have become undadi bhatta. Undadi bhatta is a very common colloquial phrase in Kannada. You would not find it in poetry, in high poetry. So for Kumaravyasa, there is no boundary between high poetry and ordinary poetry. He can bring everything. It's like Shakespeare. He brings everything. Vulgar thing, ordinary thing, this thing. But in his poetry, there is no vulgarity, I must say. But ordinary, colloquial things. He says, now undadi bhatru, all I know is to eat. And mundina javana bala musulitu. I don't have that youth or the strength of my youth. And chakra bhandarisitu. The chakra, the discus that I had. Bhandarisitu, it has rusted. So like that. So there are lots of major episodes like that. And I will give you an illustration in a minute. Drama involves suspense. It involves tension. It involves surprise. And sometimes it involves humor. And that's exactly what he does. So in him, what you find is epic poetry, yes, but the epic poetry is really drama. You can just make it a dialogue and then it will be a perfectly beautiful play. So he reconceives the genre. It's very original that way. So, for example, look at this. The tension that we were talking about. Drona has died, and that is such a fatal blow to the Kaurava army, right? After all, remember, Drona was the man who taught all these things, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, how to fight. He was the military guru. And he is dead. In the war camp, see how he describes it. Eve medukada asthana. So even the eyelids will not flutter. Normally, you would find the greatest thing that they had in those days was not cigarettes or drugs, but this Veeladele. So Veeladele Madachuva Ravasavilla, even that sound is not there. And not only that, the people are Vadagodaga, Sannegada, etc. And Audukachpadu. So they are talking just with sign language to each other. And they are Audukachpadu. So they are really talking with the jaws closed. So that kind of, look at this, his attention to detail. Here is Krishna arriving in Hastinavati for negotiations. He is one of the greatest diplomats in the world. If we are writing a history of diplomacy, you would have to place Krishna as at the top. In fact, that's what our External Affairs Minister Deshankar talks about, says. There are two great diplomats. One is Hanuman and the other one is Krishna. We don't recognize it because we think it's Purana. Here is Krishna arriving for negotiations, and he is described like this. Siri Mugada, with that magnificent face, beautiful face. Hiru Bemara, with a light perspiration. Tejiya Pura Putada Kendhulu. Kendhuli Sonkida. So the Teji is the horses, and he has come riding a chariot for a long time, for a long way, many days probably. And the dust kicked up by the hoofs of the horses is there on his face. Look at God being described like a human being, like a traveler who has just walked. Tejiya Kuraputa, that's the hoofs. Kendhuli, the red dust. Sonkida, not only that, Kudi Misayari, he has a thin mustache. And on that there is these particles of dust. Kempadada, Renubada, the red particles. Kara Marichiya Jhadake, so the hot sun, the blaze of the hot sun. Badida Taruna Tulasiya Dandayopuva, he is wearing a garland of young tulasi leaves, and that has become faded in the sun. And that's what he is wearing. Garuvada Daivana, Barava Kandano Bhagidali Vidura. Vidura saw this man coming in his doorstep. So look at the attention to detail for the smallest little thing and how realistic his description is. And that too, how he describes God in absolutely human terms. Here is Bhima. And this is a horrific scene in the war. He had taken a vow that because Dushasana had tried to disrobe Draupadi, he would break his head and he would break open his heart and take out his heart, and then with that blood he would bathe her hair, because he had tried to pull her hair. So here he is dressing Draupadi on the battlefield, and see how Kumaravyasa describes it. Shoni tambuvininda taruniya veniyanu tode todedu danta shreniyali bachidanu baitale tegedu chaluvinu. Shoni tambu, Shonita is blood, ambu is water. So with blood. Vininda taruniya veniyanu, her braid, tode todedu, he washed it, not once, but tode todedu. Look at the reduplication. That is an ordinary colloquial language. That's how we talk. Tode todedu. Tegedu. Danta shrediyali, he took his jaws, his teeth, and with that, he used that as a comb. Bachidali, he combed her hair. Not only that, look at the attention to detail of Kumaravyasa. Baitale tegedu. He even made a parting for her. Baitale tegedu. Not only that, cheluvinale. That is beautiful baitale. So he washed his wife's hair over and over with the blood and combed it with a string of teeth, neatly parting it. So now I would like to give you an illustration of one dramatic scene. I have to go fast because I don't have enough time. For example, Draupadi is coming. This is in the Virata Parva, where they are living incognito. Kichaka is sexually harassing her. So he needs help. She needs help. So she debates who she can go to. She says this Dharmaraya is useless, he is paralyzed by dharma. Paralyzed, he uses that word, Garabadidu. Gara literally is graha, but Garabadidu in Kannada, colloquial Kannada means he is paralyzed. And then she talks about, considers the other people, and then she decides on Bhima finally. And she says, I'll go to him. But he is a cook. He's a cook in the royal kitchen. So she comes into the royal kitchen in the middle of the night, unbeknownst to anybody. Look at what a risk she's taking. If somebody were to find her, both of them would be in big trouble. Not only that, their whole Agnatavasa would be gone, and then they would have to go back for another 12 years or so. So it's a very risky thing. Lot of tension. She comes and sees that in this kitchen, he has arranged everything so beautifully. Slaughtered sheep, pig meat, hair, that's rabbit flesh, streaked with blood. Notice, streaked with blood. That's how we would see, though, originally when you do these things. Plucked bird flesh, meats of split and sliced peacocks and quails, and heaps of cooked meatballs, all neatly organized. Draupadi admired Bhima's meat house kitchen. And like this, Kumaravyasa goes on in every little detail. For example, look at the naturalness with which he describes things. For example, Duryodhana hears the story of the death of Kichaka, and Kichaka was his friend, and another figure, larger than life, a friend of Virata, a brother-in-law of Virata, right? And if Kichaka was to be killed, then there's something serious going on. So she says, so he can't believe it, it's an incredible news. So how would you express incredibility in Kannada? Helu innomme, say it again, I can't believe it. Helu innomme, Matsyana todu muridude. Matsya, he is from the Matsya Raja. But Matsyana todu muridude can have two meanings. It can be Matsya Raja, that is Virata, king. His right hand is broken. Or this Matsya, that is Kichaka, his todu muridude. Subatarali kattaadu Kichaka madidane. Gandharvaridavare. So are those Gandharvas out there. So look at the brilliant metaphor of using the right hand, right arm. So this is what is called Dhvani. Using a word to suggest more than what it actually says. So there's a whole gallery of memorable characters here. You're all familiar with this, but the interesting thing is that each one is revisualized in Kumaravyasa. It's not the usual things that you find in Vyasa. Krishna is a very different character in Kumaravyasa than in Vyasa. Draupadi again a very different character. Duryodhana a very different character with a lot of self-examination and so on. Karna is in fact one of the glories of Kumaravyasa's epic. So Karna agonizes so much. And Arjuna, of course, is very urbane and courteous and so on, and Bhishma with his bluster. And everybody goes through a time of test. For example, Bhima, he meets with Hanuman in the Aranya Parvat, in the Saugandhika Pushpa episode. And then he realizes that all his strength is useless even to move the Hanuman's tail even 1 inch. He can't. So similarly, everybody learns a lesson. Yudhishthira learns a lesson in the Yaksha Prashna, and all the brothers learn a lesson. Arjuna learns a lesson in confrontation with Shiva in the Kiratarjuniya episode. And he learns a lesson with Urvashi, who curses him to become a eunuch. And Dhritarashtra is a very interesting character, always vacillating and exploited by his son. Blackmailed by his son. And on like that. Shakuni, Kunti. Kunti is such a moving character there. For example, at the time when she has to give away Karna in the beginning. One of the most moving things. She prays to Ganga, don't let him drown. And don't let him be hurt. And very gently take him on your waves and deposit him on the bank, and on. So God is depicted as a human, Krishna observing all the etiquettes of human society, calls himself Undadi Bhatta, And he says his chakra Vandarsitu, and he even, as Kurtukoti, the great Kumaravyasa critic says, he even is embarrassed. A God being embarrassed, saying, I'm ashamed. See this. Krishna is ashamed at his own anger when it comes to Bhishma in the war. So, and again like a human, and also look at how beautifully he describes this. He comes to Vidura's house. He comes on his diplomatic mission, but he doesn't stay with Duryodhana or Bhishma or anybody because they're all prepared magnificent banquets for Krishna. But he says no. Because I have come on a diplomatic mission and I cannot compromise myself. But I would rather stay with somebody who loves me, Vidura. And there, Vidura doesn't have much to offer him. He gives him a little milk in a small cup, earthen cup. Vakkudite halinali. In a small earthen cup, he gives him milk. The kind we take on trains, these earthen cups, tea. And there, Krishna is described as somebody, Palgadalli Malaguva Krishna, one who sleeps on the ocean of milk. He contented himself with just Vakkudite hal in Vidura's place. At the same time, Shiva comes disguised as a hunter in Kiratarjuniya, as you know. And there, he is dressed as a Kirata. He fights with Arjuna. And Arjuna, of course, for all his might, he has such a great reputation. He says, even the gods are not equal to me and all that. But he cannot fight with this measly hunter. So he begins to think about himself. A lesson in humility. And Shiva, he looks at Parvati who has come with him, because all the Ganas have also come like hunters. And he says, Nodidire Deviyaru. He says, lady, queen, did you see how he is fighting? This guy has been starving himself for months and months. He has been living on just dry leaves and on air and this and that without water, and then he's fighting with me like an equal. So once again, all the human emotions of humor and surprise and being impressed with this and all of that stuff is human. I'm sorry, this is Kannada has turned out to be. So I was just going to give you an example of some characters, in particular Draupadi. So I'll skip a few of these things. He depicts her as a powerful lady, a woman who is aware of her rights, a woman who is aware of ethics, of the responsibility of other people. He calls them to question. She calls them to question. She demands that they answer her. Stri matavanuttarisalagade. That's what she asks. Can't you answer a woman's question to Bhishma and other people? And then she makes fun of that place. She says, this is something that applies even today to our parliament today, for instance. Hiriyarillada sabhe sabhe. Is an assembly without wise people, elder people. And the people who will not speak the truth, are they worthy of being members of a court? And all of that. And then she asks all the other people, all the other women there. She goes and asks her mother-in-law, Gandhari, Mother-ahena, I'm your daughter. Sosayahena, I'm your daughter-in-law. Nimmaya magana kannige kalakutada magalo sosayo radiniyo besagolli nimmavana. And she can also confront her own husbands and asking her this kind of question that is unheard of in Indian literature. Gandaro means Shandaro. Are you husbands or are you eunuchs? And also she cries out in desperation, Innu huttade irali nariyar ennaval. Let there never be born a woman like me in the future on earth, because of the kind of harassment that she had. And then she is also very gentle. She comes to Bhima and she is always, there is a soliloquy there, exactly like Shakespearean soliloquies. Ebbisalu Bhugilanbano, if I wake him up, will he burst out? Bhugilan, like a fire, catching fire. And all that. And she parries words with Krishna. There's a very beautiful relationship between Krishna and Draupadi, a kind of friendship between a man and woman, non-sexual, non-marital relationship that is very difficult to find in literature. You find that in Kumaravyasa. And she can make fun of the Duryodhana and the Goshayatra. So, here there's another beautiful character, Karna. Their friendship is so beautifully described in Kumaravyasa. Bete Karnana Kude, that is hunting with Karna. Hagaliru Uta Karnana Kude, morning and evening dinner or lunch or food with meals are with Karna. Shadurasada Uta Karnana Kude, rich food. Tavibbaru Ondenisidaru Jagavari. There were two of them, but it looked like they were just one to the whole world. And when Krishna tries to break him, and his whole objective was to reduce the danger to the Pandavas. And he does that by telling Karna the secret of his birth. He says, you are also a Pandava. So that demoralizes Karna completely. It's a beautiful description in Kumaravyasa. And he does it so beautifully. He says, Tode sonki nali kutu. He makes him come and sit in the chariot, and he sits with their thighs touching each other. Literally, look at this little detail of description that is given. Tode sonki nali kutu. So that their thighs were touching each other. And then he says, why do you want to be with this Duryodhana and his Yanjalu Tambula? Why do you want that? So, and he tells him the story. And he says, you will become the king because you are the eldest. Come to the other side. So in other words, he's trying to break the parties. Exactly what goes on in our parliaments also. Getting people to switch parties. So, the Karna on the other hand is so loyal. Maralu Madhavan, go back Madhavan. Sakala Rajyada Sirige Soluvanalla. I will not yield to even the temptation of even the entire kingdom. Kauraveshwaran Ulume Tappise Bhuvanadol Enage Apta Janamilla. Other than Kauraveshwara's favor, there is nobody in the world who are dearer to me. Veera Kaurava Rayane Dataram, the great Kaurava king, is the benefactor. Atana Hage Hage, whoever he hates is my hatred. Kaivara Kaivara, etc., etc. And all these soliloquies, I'll just mention a couple. For example, Arjuna, wondering at a crucial moment, after all his prowess has failed, he begins to wonder, is he truly a hunter, Shiva, who has come in the form of a Kirata? Am I not the renowned Arjuna? Maybe I am not Partha indeed. To think of it, he is not a hunter. Has he disguised himself? Or has a white horse turned black? I for sure am not Arjuna, the son of Kunti, he agonized. So like this, the inner turmoil, the kind of thing that you find in Macbeth and Othello and Shakespeare and Hamlet and so on, you find here. Look at this. Draupadi wondering, who can I confide in? Arolu. See, that repeats Arolu again. So who can I confide in? Who can I go to? With whom can I meet? Who can I plead with? Who can I beseech to protect me? Set fire to this womanly existence. Was there ever a horrible sinner like me who suffered before? Why won't death take me away, she said. And again a question, we have already come across this. Will he flare up if I wake him? Or will he sweetly comfort me, saying, why did you come by yourself? How come your face is drawn? She's thinking about all the possibilities. Hopeful that he will be kind to her, but fearful that he might get angry. Will my visit bear fruit? What if someone finds out about my coming? Because it's such a risky thing, as I told you. Well, I'll take a chance and wake him up and see, she says. And then he refuses to help. And just like any other woman, at a time of testing time, she thinks about her mother's house. I was born to the house of the king of Panchalas. Who are my husbands? Are mere humans and such a match to them? They surpass the gods. I have this great husband. And what is my fate now? The grand excitement of doing the hair of the Virata ladies, rubbing their bodies and massaging their feet. See what I have come to. And then she gently loosened the cover and shook him by the chin. So he creates this tension. See how he creates this whole dramatic scene. He creates this tension about what might happen. And then there is a release. She opens it. He's sleeping, covering his head with a cover. Loosened the cover and shook him by the chin. The unmatched one woke up and saw the daughter of Panchala. And then he's nice to her. My love, why have you come? Why the anguish in your face? How come you came at night? Come on, tell me quickly, he says. So you think that everything is going to go well, but no, there is again a turn. So he says, no, I'm not going to help you. Don't tell me anything. I'm not going to lift a finger in your behalf. I don't want to have anything to do with wives. This sequential husbandry is hard to take. I mean, you have to take turns every year, one husband, remember? One of the brothers is a husband. This sequential husband, I don't want this disgrace. Go plead with those other 4 big husbands of yours. So you can see that there is some kind of tension. There is some kind of unhappiness in Bhima among the 5 brothers. He's not quite happy with this arrangement. So that comes across very nicely. This is something that you don't find in other Mahabharatas. So she says, she begs, and then he says, oh, you come to me only when you need the strength of my arms for battle. But when you want to have fun, you'll go with the other husbands. When it comes to fighting, you want me, the ones who enjoy are the others. She says, a single husband will be willing to die if necessary. But now I have 5 husbands and still I am in this bad shape. Are you husbands or eunuchs? Gandharo, Shandharo. And he says, look at this radical step that we come to. Something that we don't think of when we think of Mahabharata. He is talking about divorce. He says, I'm going to divorce you. Forget it. You have only 4 husbands from now on. From this day on, you are queen only to those 4. I'm giving up my time. Go pray to them. Your purpose will not bear fruit. So she's devastated. And look at how it is described. As the burning fire in her stomach rose to the crown of her head, like a piercing spear, re-piercing on its way out, like a tender plantain leaf scorched by a blaze. She sighed over and over and wailed desperately. And then she gets angry. She says, why do you sport such weighty arms? You have these big mighty arms, what's the use of them? Why were you born in the lineage of protectors of the earth? You keep filling your bellies and disgrace to the food you eat. There are not too many wives who can talk like this to their husband. And now his heart melted. And look at the change of emotions, the magnificent going back and forth of the emotions in one scene. I'm just giving you this one example. The weight of his fury mounted. He wrung his enemies in his mind. His body swelling up with passion, he gently raised his beloved, gathered her into an embrace, and wiped her tears with his upper garment. And notice the details now. He caressed her tresses, wiped her cheeks, stroked her head, and washed her lotus face with water from the jug by the bedside. Look at the detail that it's normal for people to keep a jug of water by your bedside, right, at night. So he washed her lotus face with water from the jug by the bedside. Then he said, my queen, let go of your anger. Why say more? Take it from me. I've crossed the line of my father's command. Danti dena, he says, I hereby cross it. And so on. So I don't have enough time to go through all the rest of the stuff that I wanted to, so in the next 5 minutes I'll go through this thing. Kumaravyasa is the greatest master of the Kannada language. Literally, he has the richest vocabulary. Nobody else uses more words than him. And a lot of new words he coins, and he has contributed to that. Exactly like Shakespeare, he creates a plethora of neologisms. He also flouts all the prescriptive conventions of grammar and style, and he also throws overboard all these rules by grammarian. For example, Keshi Raja in the 13th century grammar had said you cannot mix the Sanskrit and Kannada. Arisamasa, it would be the enemy compound. He doesn't care. He mixes all kinds of things. And in fact, he creates a magnificent hybrid idiom, poetic idiom, consisting of both Sanskrit and Kannada as necessary. So you don't feel that it is too Sanskritic, you don't feel that it is too raw, but both inappropriate. So, for example, in this magnificent, this very famous description of Draupadi's hair, Mahisha Kratuvarada Uddama Munijana Rachita Mantrastoma Pushkara Puta Punya Dalavishechana Dasri Munike Kayikidan. Kayikidan is the only Kannada part. Everything else is Sanskrit. So to show the glory of the Draupadi's hair and the enormity of the desecration that Duryodhana was doing by putting his hand on her hair. So like that, even when he mixes the two, there is a function, there is a purpose, there is a literary purpose that he serves. And in the middle of all this, he introduces humor. Draupadi is coming into Bhima's kitchen. I keep using the same example, same scene. And she looks at all of this and she wonders, she's so full of tension and anxiety and fear and all that, right? But still, she doesn't forget to notice that, where did he learn all this cooking, this Bhima, she says. Yalli kaltano yi suvara vidyenu. So, where did he learn this? Who did he learn this from? Okay, I'm skipping all of this stuff. And there's a profusion of dramatic scenes, each one beautifully crafted. I just gave you one example of the Draupadi approaching Bhima, but you can do the similar analysis for every one of them, and even greater would be the product. So, I'll just want to mention one important aspect of it, and I'll conclude. Kumaravyasa is known as Rupaka Samrajya Chakravarti, emperor of the kingdom of metaphor, or state of it. And his metaphors are magnificent, again like Shakespeare's. For example, Ghatotkata, which is dark skin, like a knight, is described, and his teeth. His teeth are brilliantly white. So the dark face and bright white teeth. Karirula pattanake chandrana toranava begidante. It's like a festoon of moons in a dark city or town. And when Bhishma dies, Paduvana Shaila Vipula Stamba Divigayante Ravi Merada. The sunset on the western hills, and the sun, you can imagine the bright red globe of the sun over the hill, the peaks. So it looked like a lamp that has been lit on a standard, or a big lamp, light on a lamp. Like you would do when somebody dies. When somebody dies at home, at that place you light a lamp. So, Paduvana Shaila Vipula Stamba Divigayante Ravi Merata. So it's a cosmic significance that he comes up with. And I'm going to skip all of this stuff. And look at this. He also comes up with what is called epic similes, extended similes, the kind of thing that you find in Homer and others. So look at this. He uses one single image to talk about for the whole stanza. Look at the drenched in a stream. This is Arjuna, when he realizes that there is something wrong and all his might is useless before the Kirata. And he realizes that this must be God, because he worships Linga and all that flowers end up on the Kirata. So drenched in the stream of perspiration and again dipped in the slush of sadness, wallowing in the dust of deep remorse, tossed around in the river of fear, coming out of it benumbed and drifting in all directions, Arjuna's mind was bewildered by the conflict of contrary emotions. The imagery of water and dripping and dipping and coming out of it, all of that is continued and sustained throughout the stanza. And look at this. This is a description of Draupadi. Her gaze is a blade that cuts but draws no blood. It cuts but there is no blood. It's a tightly braided rope that lashes but raises no welts. A fire that burns the chest but emits no smoke. So all of these things, he can manipulate the metaphors and twist them and turn them, and so on and so forth. So I'll just conclude by saying that Kumaravyasa is not only a master storyteller and a master composer of dramatic scenes and brilliant, powerful dialogue and wonderful metaphors, but also there is great substance in what he is saying. He touches upon some of the most important themes that we can think of. Themes of patriarchy, he questions patriarchy, and the notion of sexual harassment and the difficult plight of women. And he talks about the usual things like persuading people to switch parties. He talks about the conflict between values and convenience. He talks about the strength of character that the Pandavas undergo through their ordeals in the Aranyaparva. And he has an original take on bhakti. We talk about bhakti poets, but we never talk about Kumaravyasa in the context of Indian bhakti poetry. We talk about, for example, Tulsidas. We talk about Mirabai. But we don't talk about Kumaravyasa. His take on bhakti is very original. the relationship between the God and human being is very different. He talks about the humanness of God and how a Bhakta can actually challenge God, like Bhishma does. And he makes satire of the privileged classes, he makes fun of the Brahmins, he makes fun of the kings also. He says that you guys are never satisfied with the expansionist tendencies that you have, expanding your kingdom. And he questions, and he talks about the futility of war. Krishna talks about this over and over again. And there is a tender depiction of friendships. There is humor all through. And he bridges the divide between the Marga and Desi styles, the highly Sanskritized style and the local vernacular style. He bridges he comes up with a beautiful hybrid. And above all, he makes poetry drama. So I think I will end by talking about why a translation is necessary and what such a translation can accomplish. It will bring the beauty of Kumaravyasa to contemporary readers. When I say contemporary readers, I just don't mean people who don't know Kannada outside of Karnataka, that of course, and also outside of India, that of course. But even in Karnataka, there are a lot of young people who cannot read Kumaravyasa, who cannot read Kannada. They are more comfortable with English than with Kannada. So our readership includes all of these things. And we would like to expand, we would hope that as a result of this, the concept of Indian literature will be expanded to include classics from regional languages like Kumaravyasa. And that we would find, Kumaravyasa would find a place among the world classics because he is comparable to Shakespeare and Dante and Homer and people like that. And that this would revive the interest in and enjoyment of Kumaravyasa in Karnataka itself. And so, I will conclude by quoting a statement from a 13th century grammar Keshiraja. He says, Avadharipudu Vibudar, let the learned people listen. Dosha Vidaral Uldadam, if there are any faults and defects in what we are doing, Priyadim Tirdubudu, please correct them with affection. Gunayuttamam Dosha Viduramam Age, if it has any merit and if it is free of faults, Mechi Kaikolubudidam, please accept it with admiration. Thank you very much.